Hello, this is Watch All About with another watch review, and in this review we're looking at two watches by NTH or Nth, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Chris Vale, the owner, says it could be either way. So we're going to look at the Tikuna and also the Näcken, but to begin with, let's just start a simple unboxing process. There's no guessing as to which watch this is. This is obviously the Tikuna. So you have this outside sleeve. Crack it open, we have this nice travel case, which is obviously very helpful. I prefer travel cases than standard boxes because at least you can use them. Slip it out. And we have the watch within, so nice and secure. Obviously got spare links in there as well. So that's the unboxing of the Tikuna. I'm not going to bother you with the unboxing of the Näcken, but rather I'll just bring the watch in here. So these two watches are part of the NTH or the Nth Submariner or sub range, they call it. Now they have a reputation for having class-leading cases and bezels within their price range. So their price range, they're both $650. Now you might think to yourself, why is this impressive? $650, I'd sort of expect them to be decent, but as we go through it, you'll see they really are absolutely sensational for the price. So these two watches are pretty much exactly the same in construction, apart from two key differences, and I'm pretty sure you can tell. Obviously the dial is different, and the bezel insert, but everything else is exactly the same. So they both boast vintage vibes. Now you might prefer the slightly more traditional vintage Tudor snowflake sub influence of the Näcken, but maybe you prefer the slightly more out there Tikuna, which takes inspiration from the vintage UG Polerouters or the Longines Legend Diver and some other vaguely sci-fi looking stuff from the 70s, as Chris Vale himself puts it. So two different ends of the spectrum here, so it obviously depends what style you like. So down to personal choice which one you prefer, obviously, but one thing's for sure, these are built to last in a very, very decent manner. So let's check them out in further detail then. So let's start off with the specs. So let's start off with the dimensions then. 40mm diameter, a height of 11.5mm, and a lug-to-lug length of 48mm. Now, the height of 11.5mm is really, really tremendous, really. Very, very few micro brands manage to get watches in under 12mm, especially housing a Miyota 9015 movement. But this is deliciously slender. It's so... the case shape and dimensions is absolutely perfect. The 40mm diameter as well, I think, is a real sweet spot for vintage inspired subs or just diver watches in general. So he's really hit the sizing on this perfectly. The weight is 144 grams, with enough, that's with the links removed for it to fit my slightly over 7-inch wrist. Water resistance rating is 30 atmospheres or 300 meters. So this is a proper dive watch as well. These two watches are built to be used as dive watches. The movement, as I mentioned previously, Miyota 9015 movement. So that's really good, solid, dependable, high beat automatic, and we see it a lot in micro brands who want to offer you some alternative, affordable alternative to an ETA or a Sellita, but they still boast the same, more or less the same specs. They have everything you need. High beat, 28.8 thousand beats per hour. Hacking seconds, hand wind, automatic winding as well, obviously, and around 40-hour power reserve. So they really do tick all the boxes in that regard. Lug width is 20mm, but we'll discuss the size of the bracelet in a few moments. The warranty is pretty cool as well. You get 2 years warranty. However, on top of that, you get a 6+6 guarantee. That's how Nth describe it. So that means that you have 6 weeks to return any watch for a full refund, net of shipping costs. And on top of that, the other 6 means that the movement is guaranteed for 6 years from the watch's date of production. So again, pretty neat in that you have that cover in case anything should go wrong. And 6 years is pretty impressive, to be honest. Christopher Ward's is good, and that's 5 years. So NTH or Nth have obviously really put all their eggs in these baskets. They have built them to last, and they've followed it up with that impressive warranty and guarantee. So I mentioned the price, $650 US. Some people might grumble, oh, $650 for just a Miyota movement. However, the quality, the build quality overall certainly justifies that price tag. So let's talk about these watches aspect by aspect. So let's start off by discussing the case. So the size of the case, as I mentioned previously, it fits so well on the wrist. Not only is 40mm a real sweet spot for vintage-inspired divers, but the slender height, as I mentioned previously, 11.5mm, it fits so nicely on the wrist. And anything under 12mm in a micro-brand situation is a rarity. So you've the smallest difference, you literally 0.5mm, it really does make a difference when you're wearing it. And you know, they've done a tremendous job at creating these beautiful cases. The shape is, you know, pretty much just a standard lean barrel shape with very downturned lugs, so it fits the wrist well. And obviously on these lugs we have drilled through lug holes as well, so you can quite easily swap the bracelet if you want to, which is always good. That's quite a vintage inspired thing as well. The finishing on the case is genuinely absolutely spotless as well. You can see here it's primarily brushed, but we have a polished shoulder here, polished shoulder on the underside as well. And then if we check out the case back is a very plain affair, but you can see here we have just the NTH logo surrounded by 3 different specifics, brushed central bit with a polished ring around it as well. So very, very low key, but functional basically. The other key thing about this case is obviously the crown. Now the cool thing about this is the NTH logo is very, very beautifully done, but it's loom filled as well. I'll obviously show you a loom shot of that now. You can see how exquisitely manufactured it is, and the grip on it is brilliant. The vintage inspired lack of crown guards as well really calls out to me. I think it looked great on this case. Really easy to use, good thread on it as well, just genuinely superbly manufactured. So moving on to another key feature of NTH watches, and that is their bezel. Now you might think, who cares about the bezel? But when you have a decent bezel, it is very difficult to appreciate lesser bezels because just the action of it, the grip, the finishing, the quality of the insert as well is always very, very pleasing to use, and you do find yourself using it more, even if it's just to spin it around just to appreciate it. So the it's 120 click. If I just give you a quick whirl. Not sure if you can hear that impressive click as well. So 120 click, unidirectional, so it's just one way. And let me just spin that around again, and we'll see how it lines up. Absolutely spot on in terms of how they both line up. And you know, even Seiko can't do that right. So good job, NTH. So beautiful action, but the finishing of it is so impressive. It's so sharp and clean and crisp. The manufacturing of this grip, it really is lovely to behold and lovely to use. And obviously we have the bezel insert, so we can see 2 different styles of bezel insert here. Obviously we have a lighter one on the Näcken and a darker one on the Tikuna. So they're all of NTH inserts are either DLC or simple PVD. If it's black or some shade of dark grey, it's DLC. Otherwise, it's PVD. In either case, it's very, very impressively applied, this protective coating, and it basically ensures that you have pretty much, you know, good scratch resistance, as good scratch resistance as you can. Chris Vale says that it's the thickest application they can physically get for this protective coating, the DLC or the PVD. So that's always a good, impressive stat to know. You know, you can be sure that they will remain as scratch resistant, scratch free as possible. Obviously the bezel inserts have the details nice and neatly engraved and filled with loom as well, and the loom is so strong, but we'll discuss that in a bit when we look into the dial, because that's where the loom that's where the loom really talks. One final thing to mention is the double dome sapphire crystal on these watches. So they are domed, so you can see at a tight angle, get good visibility on that. And it does have a small amount of anti-reflective coating. It's probably the one thing that I wish was a little bit better, because you do tend to get reflections, as you can see there, which I think could be improved a tiny bit, but that is literally the only thing that I have concern of. It's not even a concern, it's just a note really for the case. Okay, let's move on to the dial. So let's start off with discussing the dial of the Näcken then. So this is obviously a bit of a traditional vintage Tudor snowflake sub influence. Is slightly more easygoing, should I say, than the slightly more out there Tikuna. So this, I think, will probably relate to more people. And one of the key things about the Näcken is the lovely, lovely texture to the dial. And you can see there, as the light hits it, you can really see that texture come to life. Beautifully subtle, yet really, really eye-catching. We have classic Tudor snowflake style hands as well, with the relevant square hour markers. But just the general finishing of the dial is pretty much flawless. So you can see here the print work, very nice and fine, and just really bold, really good legibility. And obviously we have the snowflake style hands to thank for that. The finishing of the hands as well is relatively polished, as you can see here in the light. They're nice and reflective, and I do like the date window at 6 as well. I do prefer a date window at 6 rather than 3 or even crazily at 9, because I just like the symmetry of a dial with a date wheel at 6, and it's just very neatly and nicely put in there with a very neat and gentle, subtle date wheel to match the dial itself as well. So talking about the loom then, now the loom on this thing is an absolute beast. As you can see here, I haven't charged it. I'm in broad daylight and you can see the loom peeking through there. And that is literally the story here. The strength of this loom is unreal. Now, it's super luminova, so loads of people use super luminova. So I actually asked Chris Vale, why is your loom so darn impressive? Because I'm not going to lie to you, it's one of the best microbrand watches strength loom that I've come across for a very, very long time. And he basically said it's simple. A good application makes a big difference. And, you know, literally it just means shove loads on and it will be strong. And it's an incredible example here where just something as simple as that makes such a gigantic difference, because it's so unbelievable when you're outside and you come in and you just see it glowing so brightly. And it's fast to charge. It glows brightly, and it genuinely lasts all night long as well. It's that strong. So really, really impressed by the strong loom. And I know a lot of people, you know, for dive watches in particular, good loom is a real big tick in their eyes. So let's consider the Tikuna now. And as you can see, slightly more sci-fi inspired, but still very 70s. And it certainly does provide a completely different look, despite being, you know, more or less the exact same watch. First of all, the bezel insert completely different, as we mentioned previously. So the dark framing of this very sci-fi inspired dial. You can see the lines, the red lines, quite eye-catching. I do like the red used on the logo, the lines, and also the 300 meters, 1,000 feet just below the Tikuna name. No date on the Tikuna. Mainly because the numerals, the 12, 3, 6, and 9, really use that UG Polerouter theme, and I think it's a good idea. It's the right decision as well, because he hasn't watered down the style to fit in a date wheel. He hasn't watered it down, he's kept to the inspiration, and, you know, he's not tried to wedge in a date wheel anywhere. So moving on to the hands. So these hands are also polished. You can see if I catch the light, they're quite nice and reflective. I do like to see quite unusual and quite unique hand shapes, and this is certainly the case with the Tikuna. Very, very sci-fi, very vintage inspired, very angular as well, you know, big, chunky, bold shapes with this counterweight on the seconds hand, and obviously just a really wide angular sword for the hour hand, and two arrows stacked on each other pretty much for the minute hand as well. Cool design, and I really, really dig it, because it's just nice to see something a little bit different. It might be a little bit too different for some people, however I think it's a suitable amount. You know, it's not overdone, not overcooked, not too brash either, but so yeah, it's nicely done. And again, the loom on the Tikuna is just as strong as the Näcken. So let's move on to the bracelet then. So the bracelet construction is great. The shape of the links, sort of, if you can see the side profile, almost like a grain of rice kind of shape. So very comfortable on. It fits the wrist really nicely. And the only visual thing that I have, it's not necessarily an issue, but something that I would have slightly preferred is, I just think the central link could probably be a little bit wider and the outside link's a little bit thinner, but that is literally just a visual thing, my personal preference. It wouldn't stop me from wearing it because, you know, truth be told, it is a very, very well manufactured bracelet with beautifully soft and butter-like action on the links you can see here, so it molds to the wrist really nicely and it's very comfortable on as well. And as you can see, the end link there, as you'd expect, pretty much perfect fit with the case itself and between the lugs. So just moving on to the double locking bracelet. So the first lock is the top flap with the NTH logos. Everything's really firmly put together as well, so it feels very secure. It's not going to just pop off. So first of all, we have the top flap. Obviously, we have the Nth logo engraved nice and neatly on that, and then we have 2 buttons either side to open it up, and that's our second lock there. So very sturdy, and we also have 6 micro adjustment points as well, so you can get a pretty much perfect fit on this bracelet, especially being that the links themselves aren't massively long, so you can get a really, really good fit, and they are regular pins as well. Okay, so what are my final thoughts regarding these 2 vintage inspired subs from NTH or Nth? Well, for $650 US, I think they are tremendously put together watches. There's a couple of things about them, well, there's a number of things about them which pretty much are class leading, as I mentioned in the outset. The finishing of the case is just absolutely delightful. Nothing else in this price range comes close, and I'm being, you know, serious about that. The other thing is the bezel action, beautiful, and the grip of the bezel, so nicely done. The crown, just every single aspect of the case you cannot fault. The loom is absolutely tremendous as well. Again, class leading, and you would be hard pushed to find another watch in this price range to match it or beat it. So that's 2 things. The designs, yes, some people for the Näcken will say, well, it's a straight homage of a Tudor. Yes, obviously it is inspired by that, but I think, you know, there's so many homages out there. I don't think it's necessarily an issue that it is a homage. I would personally prefer the Näcken because it is slightly more wearable. It's more of a daily wear, if you know what I mean, because it isn't quite as radical and out there as the Tikuna. The Tikuna itself, very bold and certainly eye-catching as well. And yes, it is personal preference which one you prefer, and I'm sure there are going to be people who appreciate the Tikuna, but for me personally, the Näcken would be the one that I choose. So spotless, flawless construction from top to bottom. Great watches, and from a really good guy in a good company as well. Chris Vale is incredibly passionate about NTH, his watch brand. He's been through a couple of different brands as well, so he really knows his stuff. He's been doing this for a long time, and you know, the warranty and the 6+6 guarantee as well. You will get a watch that lasts you a long time. That is guaranteed. So you will get your money's worth out of this if you do get one. So really nice watches, and I would highly recommend them as well. You know, anyone who has them, if you check the forums or Facebook groups, anyone who has one raves about it, and I've finally you know, been able to really get to grips with what they're saying as well, because they are tremendous. So this was the NTH Tikuna and the Näcken, and that's what it's all about. So thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and also comment your thoughts on the video below. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.